Welcome back, and a very, very heartfelt welcome to the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future, program that, as I've mentioned, makes this one possible. His name is Rod Martin. He is an entrepreneur and business tycoon who cut his teeth in the entrepreneurial sector with Peter Thiel at PayPal. He has also been a policy advisor to then Governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, now the very distinguished ambassador of the United States to Israel. He's a dear personal friend as well as a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China. And we're always delighted to be able to catch up and pick that free-range mind of his. Welcome back, my friend. Good to have you. So, Rod, you are a Floridian.
Yes.
And we were just talking with Debbie Georgatos, a Texan, about her governor's efforts to address one of the great problems of our time, which is the most dangerous, arguably, of the myriad Sharia supremacist organizations on the planet, namely the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the outfit that, along with one of its prominent front groups, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the governor of Texas designated as a terrorist organization, foreign terrorist organization, as well as actually a transnational criminal organization. The governor of your state, Ron DeSantis, has just done the first part, designating both the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE as terrorist organizations. I wanted to give you a chance to describe, your sense of the importance of that designation by your governor.
Well, it's yet another reason to elect Ron DeSantis president someday. He might have to wait his turn after J.D. Vance, but still, this is a great man. He's done a fantastic job here in Florida, and Florida is an exceedingly international state. You go down to Miami-Dade County, which is the unquestioned economic and cultural center of the entire Caribbean basin. 73% of the population speaks English as a second language. So we're sort of New York South without all the communism, and that's kind of exciting. So the governor has been really good on these kinds of issues. We're instituting this new program for grades 6 through 12 to study the horrors of communism in our public schools. I don't know of any state that's ever done that. That's fantastic. And by the way, very, very popular among our many Cuban and Venezuelan refugees down in South Florida. But
refugees from communism, let the record show, of course.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we need this kind of education absolutely everywhere. We beat the Nazis to death, and God knows they deserve it. But the communists killed 10 times as many people as the Nazis did in the 20th century. Somebody might ought to notice, especially when they're winning mayor of New York. So this logically follows. We, of course, had the flight schools here in Florida that trained the 9/11 terrorists. We have a lot of nexus with a lot of the world. And for the governor to designate the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE, which certainly deserves it as an international terrorist organization, is not only factually correct, but it's a needed shot across the bow. And as the president moves toward a decision on this also, the fact that you have Florida and Texas pushing further, faster, certainly bodes well for where the president ultimately lands.
Boy, I pray so. We're also undergoing, I think, considerable sort of stealthy jihadism, as our friend Robert Spencer calls it, from Qatar, the prime backer of the Muslim Brotherhood, the prime backer of, for that matter, every jihadi organization on the planet, Sunni and Shiite, as far as I can tell. And it has a lot of influence in official Washington at the moment, as you know. Do you worry that influence might ultimately wind up getting a pass from the president for the Brotherhood?
Well, I could be wrong because everybody is from time to time, but my guess is Donald Trump is not a sucker. Qatar is at best a frenemy. really would like to wipe us out of existence, but they can't. They don't have the ability. You know, it's like your pet cat. You know, he goes around mad all the time that he's not a lion so he can eat you. But since he can't, you know, he'll let you pet him once in a while. You know, that's kind of Qatar. They are in a position where Israel just demonstrated that they can do anything to Qatar they want at any moment without any warning, and all their technology avails them nothing. So they go running to Trump and beg him to basically be a protectorate, which makes sense for us. All the talk of this being a surprise to the White House, I just don't buy it. This sounds like a classic double teaming, and we're trying to put Qatar in a box where they play nice, and they're not going to play nice all the time, but the nicer they play, the easier everything goes. So yeah, they want the Muslim Brotherhood exempted from any of these things, no question about it. I don't think they're going to get their way, but I do think it may take a minute because the president is also trying to work out this Gaza peace deal. We've got it in principle. We've got it on paper. We've got a bunch of countries signed on to it. The devil's now in the details of the execution. And so he's probably going to tread a little bit lightly here to make sure that all the I's dot. But my guess is ultimately he does exactly what Ron DeSantis just did.
What Ron DeSantis just did, what I thought was particularly important, Rod, is he expressly directed the agencies of Florida to go after material support for terrorism. This is another kettle of fish, as they say. It's not necessarily strapping on, you know, the vest yourself and going into a crowded space and blowing yourself and everybody in proximity up. But it's enabling that kind of behavior, and that is something that is done quite widely. Unfortunately, some of it is at the behest of or with the, you know, connivance of the Muslim Brotherhood. Some of it is a function of what the outfits that they work with, organizations like CARE or these various Islamic centers or Islamic mosques, you know, that are branded as the Muslim Brotherhood franchise in the community, are actively seeking to recruit for jihad, to give zakat, as they call it, tithing, in a Christian sense, for jihad. And it's going to be critical, it seems to me, that President Trump, when he addresses this, is reminded, and we're doing it every single day, of something he said in Youngstown, Ohio, on the 15th of August, 2016, namely that in a major address about how to deal with the radical Islamic ideology, as he called it, we must strip out and remove one by one the support networks for this radical Islamic ideology. How do you see that playing out, my friend, and how important is it?
It's very important. Trump wants his enemies to think he's a chaos monster because it constantly keeps them off balance. No matter how predictable he is, they never predict what he's actually doing, and they're always shocked, and they can't fit it into their narrative. But this is of a piece with what he's doing with Antifa, both American and European. He's directed the FBI to go after their support networks and really look into who is enabling this. I mean, if you have a BLM riot in Minneapolis and just at an odd moment in the middle of the night, a pallet of bricks shows up, you know, that's expensive, and the transport is expensive, and somebody paid for it, and it wasn't a bunch of sign-carrying rioters. So who's enabling this, and are they involved in a RICO-type conspiracy? He's just applying that to the Brotherhood.
We need to get to the bottom of it. Ron DeSantis' model is going to be very helpful in that respect, I think. Rod, we have to take a short break. We're going to come right back, and we're going to talk about the national security strategy that President Trump is following right after this. We're back, and so is Rod Martin, the proprietor of rodmartin.org, where you can find the Rod Martin reports. I strongly commend them to you. They are, every one of them, very interesting, whether he is the author or he has a guest author. It's really valuable, food for thought, and a basis for action in many cases as well. And Rod, speaking of action, one of the things that we have seen the president act on in the past couple of days was this national security strategy. It lays out in broad brush terms both the sort of fundamentals of his strategy and how he is applying them in, I think, 4 or 5 regions of the world. I want to talk to you about a specific aspect of how this strategy might be applied, but what are your thoughts about it broadly?
Well, let me start with what it's not. George Friedman, who is wonderful, and everybody should read George. George wrote a piece, came out this morning on the national security strategy, and everything he says is correct, but he's coming at it, I think, from the wrong direction. His view, and he's been stressing this since at least the storm before the calm, has been the United States is withdrawing from the world. That is absolutely not the right way to look at this. I understand what he's saying. The details are correct, but that's not what Trump is doing here. What Trump is doing is standing up allies to actually be partners. He's not withdrawing from Europe. He's making Europe actually stand up and be reliable allies with enough military force so that we don't have to be their nursemaid. And that has been the problem since at least the end of the Cold War, and I would say before that. These guys have been freeloading on us. As of last year, we were paying 70.5% of the costs of the defense of NATO. This is insane. And so getting to 5% of GDP, and he got them all to sign on to it, getting them to build real militaries that can actually defend their part of the world is not a withdrawal from the world, it's a force multiplier. It means when we're needed, we really count, instead of having to do the lifting for a bunch of, once again, freeloaders. Same thing is true in Asia, and you see that with the upgrading of the South Korean and Japanese militaries and the renewed, I should say, alliance with the Philippines, and just a bunch of things happening that are very, very positive. And this national security strategy makes the point that can be taken wrong, I think, but it makes the point that what we really want is to back off the military confrontation with China. We want everybody on a defensive stance, and we want to trade. Well, that can sound like some kind of pullback, but again, what it really does is it makes it nearly impossible for China to actually invade Taiwan. If they actually pull back to a more defensive stance, and our defensive stance is already in place, we're not seeking an offensive war with them, that actually puts you on a glide path to what we saw in the late 80s, where the Soviet Union, confronted with an arms race it couldn't afford and collapsing internal economics, ultimately collapsed as a political entity. It can't strike out at a certain point, and China couldn't strike out at a certain point. And I think that's where everything Trump's been doing is trying to maneuver them into. That gives them the opportunity to bet on themselves without having a hostile approach to the world. Maybe they'll take it. Maybe they won't.
Well, putting them on the ash heap of history seems to me to be the right prescription for actual stability and security in the Pacific and worldwide, for that matter, as well. I know this is something we share as a opinion on the present danger China members, but let me ask you, Rod, our chairman and I, Brian Kennedy, wrote Stephen Miller yesterday. He is the deputy chief of staff of the White House, of course, about the fact that we have the Chinese seemingly reneging, surprise, surprise, on at least part of the so-called trade truce with regard specifically to rare earth minerals. They say they're not going to give them free flow of them to other than civilian companies that are compliant, as they put it, in an unspecified context. The seeming meaning of which is the military-related companies in the United States are not going to get access to them, and those that are deemed to be engaged in sort of dual-use activities aren't either. My concern about this is, Rod, if there isn't, as the national security strategy calls for, fair and reciprocal arrangements in our relationship with China, we're going to find them emboldened by this and probably acting even more aggressively. And specifically, I just ask you this. We are still enabling Chinese companies that do work with their military industrial complex to have access to our capital markets. It would seem to me fairness and reciprocity argues for stopping that, especially under these circumstances. Your
Well, it
thoughts, sir?
absolutely does. And my guess is Stephen Miller's all over that. I would think that the administration's response to a lengthy reneging, which, you know, believe me, they're anticipating. China's never kept a deal. When has China ever kept a deal? That's just not in the cards. The only way they will keep a deal is if you force them to do so in some way, hopefully short of war. So, you know, what we're looking at here is yet another lever Donald Trump has that hasn't been used up to now. We can absolutely sanction or something short of sanctioning those exact companies and be completely within our rights. Hey, you did this, we're going to do that. We told you it would be reciprocal. And I don't think they can survive that. I think that they're going to have to back down at that point. But if they don't, it's just going to speed up the process of our building rare earths refining capacity, which takes away one of the few levers they actually possess.
Yeah. Well, our argument, Brian's and mine, is that this memorandum of understanding that gave the Chinese preferential access to our capital markets, both their military companies, amazingly, as well as so-called civil military fusion ones, all of which, under the President's America First investment policy back in February of earlier this year, I should say, is not permissible. So our hope is that this reneging, whether it's protracted or otherwise, is going to prompt a very important cessation of the practice of underwriting the companies that are building weapons with which to kill us.
I think
Rod,
that's very likely.
well, let's see. I hope so. Steve Miller is a key guy in all of this, and at the moment there seems to be a lot of efforts to, do nothing that might jeopardize the trade truce, and this is an exception that needs to be made, in my estimation. Let me turn quickly to one last thing with you, Rod, before we run out of time. You've written a very interesting piece about a case that the Supreme Court will be hearing shortly about so-called birthright citizenship. All of the smart people tell us that this isn't even open for really serious discussion. It's obviously in the Constitution that you're born here, you're an American citizen by definition, no matter how you got here or when. Talk us through your countervailing argument, sir, and what you think the court is going to do.
Well, okay, let me start with nothing I'm about to say suggests that Congress can't enact birthright citizenship anytime it chooses. That's not the case I'm making. What I'm saying is the Constitution absolutely does not require it. And we know this for various reasons, among which are the text of the document itself. The 14th Amendment applies this to people who are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Okay, that absolutely applied to slaves. Guess who it didn't apply to? It didn't apply to Indians. Now that's interesting. And
Indians as in Native American Indians.
Yeah, Congress saw fit to come back in the 1920s and naturalize them all by statute because they were not citizens. Well, they were born here, they live here. How are they not citizens if the 14th Amendment requires birthright citizenship? But they were not for more than half a century after the passage of the 14th Amendment. Second case, Wong Kim Ark is constantly cited as the judicial basis for birthright citizenship. But the people who make that argument, including a Yale law professor I debated, and that video's up on rodmartin.org, they always make the argument that Wong Kim Ark was the child of two foreigners and was found to be a citizen. Yeah, but you missed a step. Both of the parents were legal residents of the United States. That's very
therefore
different
subject
from
to the
crossing the Rio Grande and popping out a kid. I mean, that's just not at all the same thing.
And Rod, just to be clear, the difference is that those were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States?
They were subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And moreover, as I was about to say, you also have the case of diplomats. If diplomats come to Washington and they have a baby here, that baby is never a citizen of the United States. If foreign military forces come and train in the United States and some of the soldiers have a baby, that is never a citizen of the United States. Why? Because they aren't subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So I think actually we could have a 6-3 decision here for Donald Trump, and it'll be an earthquake rhetorically, but really all it does is it gives Congress options, because Congress can either legislate birthright citizenship or not. And
if they choose to do so.
Different.
Yeah, if they choose to do so. Rod, we have to leave it at that. Fascinating, as always. Thank you for all you do with Rod Martin Reports, rodmartin.org. Check it out, folks, as well as check out his next appearance next week. Take care, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.